Singapore and Sydney are two great cities excellent for working and living. They have so much in common. Both are safe, clean, with a diverse job market, large expat community, and in general, very convenient for living. However, in today's video, I'm gonna talk about 4 things that make Singapore unique compared to Sydney and 4 things that make Sydney unique compared to Singapore. Let's go. Number 1, housing. Singapore has a unique housing system that does not exist anywhere else in the world. For example, 80% of all Singaporeans live in government-built and government-subsidized apartments. Those are HDB apartments or Housing and Development Board. HDB flats are sold on a 99 years leasehold basis, which means that after 99 years, this apartment goes back to the government. But in exchange, the government gives you large discounts. Singaporean government offers convenient schemes for the first-time buyers. For example, there is a scheme called BTO or buy to order when you're buying an apartment which is still under construction or the construction even didn't start yet. These are usually young couples that express their intent to become a married couple in the future. They need to wait 3 to 5 years, but they get huge discounts in exchange. Just to give you an idea, if you're looking for a 3 to 4 bedroom apartment in a prime location in Singapore through BTO scheme, the price will not exceed 1 million Singapore dollars. The catch is that you're not allowed to sell this apartment in the next 5 to 10 years, and this scheme applies only to the first-time buyers. If you're a second-time buyer, you will not get this generous discount. However, if you're a young couple and this is your first home, you get a huge discount. Mostly all housing units in Singapore are in so-called apartment blocks or flat blocks, or just in general tall buildings. You don't really have that many small private houses with 1 or 2 floors. Those are extremely expensive in Singapore. However, in Australia, you have a lot of private houses, and in general, the housing market in Australia is private as opposed to Singapore, where it's mainly government subsidized and government owned. Sydney has more private houses, it has more spacious housing in general than in Singapore. However, on the flip side, the prices will be super high and they're not subsidized by the government. While in Singapore, the government gives you a discount, so essentially it's influencing the price of the apartment. In Australia, the government helps you to get a better loan or to pay a down payment, but the government does not influence the price of the housing unit. Singapore has the strongest passport in the world, which means that as a Singaporean, you can travel to almost any country in the world without a visa. Australia also has a very strong passport, but not as strong as in Singapore. Additionally, Singapore sits in a very convenient location. A lot of great places are easily reachable from Singapore. For example, Bali is just 2.5 hours away by plane. Thailand is 1.52 hours away by plane. You have Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, you name it. Sydney feels a little bit isolated from the rest of the world. The nearest foreign country to Sydney is Indonesia or New Zealand. The flight lasts around 3 hours. And in general, if you want to fly from the east side of Australia to the west side of Australia, it takes around 4 hours. So if you're traveling from Sydney to Asia or to Europe, you will fly 4 hours only above Australia. Even though Sydney is a little bit isolated from the rest of the world, there are so many things to do and so many places to see in Sydney and in places very close to Sydney. Australia is a gigantic country with a lot of beautiful cities and a lot of beautiful places. I don't have to say that Australia has a unique flora and fauna. Everyone knows koalas and kangaroos. These are animals that can be found only in Australia. Australia is home to one of the best beaches in the world. As a beach lover and a beach goer, I really appreciate that it takes you just 45 minutes by public transport from CBD Sydney to get to, let's say, Bondi Beach, one of the most remarkable beaches in the world. It's inside the city. You don't have to travel to a neighboring town or fly to an exotic place. That beach is in Sydney. You can also take a boat from CBD and walk a little bit. It takes you 45 minutes to 1 hour, and you also can get from CBD Sydney to Manly Beach, another exciting and beautiful beach in Sydney. Just imagine, right now you're surrounded by skyscrapers, you're in a very busy area with a lot of people wearing suits around you, and less than 1 hour later you can end up lying on the beautiful beach and enjoying blue ocean and beautiful waves. Not to mention that outside of Sydney there are so many pristine and world-class beaches. That's the life you get in Sydney. This city is paradise. Even though the population of Sydney is slightly smaller than in Singapore, 6 million against 5 million, nevertheless, Sydney feels a little bit busier and noisier than Singapore. It doesn't mean that Sydney is busy and noisy. No, it has the right balance between being not too quiet and not too noisy. However, Sydney feels a little bit more bustling than Singapore. It feels like there are more things to do and more places to go to. In other words, if you get too bored in Singapore, you can travel to amazing countries nearby. However, it's difficult to get bored in Sydney, and even if you do get bored in Sydney, Australia is gigantic. It offers you a lot of unique places, unique flora and fauna. You can find animals in Australia that you cannot find anywhere else in the world. In Sydney, you can jump on a car and travel anywhere you want. In Singapore, if you jump on a car and you travel somewhere else, you will end up in Malaysia in like 20-30 minutes. It's just the nature of a city-state. Speaking of cars, the most expensive cars in the world are here in Singapore. This is not an exaggeration. Cars in Singapore are literally the most expensive in the world. If you buy a car in the United States for 25,000 USD, you will pay 5 times more for the same car in Singapore, because here you have to cover a lot of extra fees. The government of Singapore wants to discourage you to own a car and to rely on a public transport, which decreases pollution and car traffic on the roads. In Sydney, car ownership is more affordable. More people own a car in Sydney than in Singapore. So if you like to drive a lot, then Sydney is the place to be. But if you enjoy excellent public transport, then look no further. Singapore is a great place. So in other words, you have a choice. In Sydney, housing is more expensive than in Singapore. However, in Sydney, cars are much cheaper than in Singapore. At the same time, Singapore has a much lower income tax than in Australia. The highest income tax you will end up paying here in Singapore is 24%, while in Australia, the highest bracket is 45%, almost double of what you pay in taxes in Singapore. Personally, don't like paying high taxes. Who does? However, I do appreciate when you get something in return for the taxes you're paying. And Australia, I think, is an excellent example of that country, because you get great people, great cities, great beaches, great climate, great flora and fauna, excellent public transport, a lot of other great things that Australia can offer. I mentioned at the beginning that Singapore and Sydney have large expat communities. However, the path to naturalization is very different. Australia is more open to foreigners becoming Australians one day. You need to live only 4 years in the country, pay taxes, and commit no crimes. In most European countries, a path to citizenship is 5 to 10 years. So in this sense, Australia is even outperforming many European countries. Additionally, Australia offers a points-based work visa or permanent residence. You can apply for this visa while staying in your home country, and depending on your qualifications, you get a certain number of points, which can eventually help you to get this visa. Do you speak English? You get this number of points. Do you have a higher education? You get this number of points. What is your profession? IT or something else? You get this number of points. You accumulate your points and eventually you can get this work visa. It's not easy. It can take up to several years while your visa is being processed, but eventually I don't really know that many countries in the world that offer this type of points-based visa. Naturalization system in Singapore is very, very different from Australia. First of all, it's much more restrictive. Staying 4 years in Singapore will not even earn you permanent residence unless you meet certain requirements. Singapore is a city-state. It cannot absorb too many expats. That's why it has a very high bar for permanent residence and citizenship. To apply for a Singaporean passport, you need to stay in Singapore as a permanent resident for at least 2 years. And when I say permanent resident, I mean a person with a document called permanent residency, not just any work visa. For example, if I'm staying in Singapore for 4 years or 5 years on employment pass, which is a type of a work visa, it does not guarantee me permanent residence, and without permanent residency, I cannot apply for Singaporean passport. Even if I do get permanent residency at some point and I do apply for Singaporean passport, I will have to give up my national passport in order to become a Singaporean citizen. In Australia, you can keep your original passport alongside your new Australian passport. In other words, if you are an expat and you're thinking about obtaining a second strong passport, then Australia is a place to go. However, if your goal is to travel in Southeast Asia and you're not really seeking a second passport, then Singapore can be a good place as well. Even though Singapore and Sydney are global cities with offices of different international companies, Singapore is usually home to the Asia-Pacific headquarters, while those companies open a much smaller office in Sydney that works specifically in Australia. When you walk on the streets of Singapore or Sydney, you see big brands everywhere: Visa, MasterCard, TikTok, Google, you name it. However, as I mentioned, these offices in Singapore are larger than in Sydney, which means that you have more job opportunities in Singapore. If you're someone who is looking for a job in an international company, international bank, international law firm, Singapore will offer you more opportunities than Sydney. However, as I said, Sydney is still a really great place and it has a lot of different kind of jobs. Just Singapore as a regional hub has an advantage over Sydney. However, Sydney still has a lot of very interesting companies and jobs. So this is it. I think that both Singapore and Sydney are incredible cities. Australia is much larger than Singapore, so you can travel across the country and you can see unique animals such as koalas and kangaroos. Australia offers you an easier path to naturalization without revoking your original passport. You can also buy a private house in Australia and own a car, and you don't have to give your house back to the government in 99 years. On the other hand, Singapore offers you the strongest passport in the world if you manage to get one, huge discounts on your apartment if you're a first-time buyer, much lower income tax than in Australia, which means higher take-home salary, and much more job opportunities in international companies than in Sydney. Nevertheless, both cities are excellent and it's up to you to decide which one is better.